Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And in today's episode, we have a change to the scheduled programme. Due to the spread of the Omicron variant, we've decided not to go to the cinema and see Spider-Man No Way Home, as mentioned at the end of the last episode. We will be discussing this film at some future point. However, today, we will be talking about a double bill of action and drama. First, with this year's epic 6-part TARDIS adventure, Doctor Who Flux, and then with Amazon's Wrath of Man, starring Jason Statham and directed by Guy Ritchie. But before we dive into all of that, Nick, what indoor activity have you been up to recently?
I've been indoors and I've started watching another one on my list of premium telly shows I should definitely watch at some point. This is The Americans, which is currently up on the Disney Plus Star channel in the UK, which obviously I already have, so I can cover all these Marvel shows for MFV. So I thought, let's get something else out of it. And I actually started watching the whole of the 6 seasons of The Americans. I've now seen 2 of them. For those of you who don't know, The Americans is a acclaimed espionage drama show about a couple who are raising their family in the suburbs, but are also sleeper agents for the KGB. This is, of course, set during the Reagan administration, Cold War still running type era. So a lot of it is focused on the spy games back and forth between the KGB and the FBI, with this couple often sort of caught in the middle. Basically, if you've seen the Black Widow movie, it's like that bit at the start of the Black Widow movie where she's living with a family in America, only instead of that ending in like 2 minutes, that's the whole plot of the show. It's all about that family struggling to stay hidden and being ordered by the KGB to take bigger and bigger risks and do more and more on the side spy missions. Maybe just because this show's been back in the discourse lately due to its revival series. But it reminds me a bit of Dexter, only a version of Dexter with slightly more nuanced characterization than Dexter, a show which often fell back a bit on, he's just a crazy bastard.
Yes, it did. I do remember that.
Whereas The Americans does, I think, have some aspirations towards who are these people? What makes them do these things? How does it affect their relationship with their children? That sort of thing. So yeah, I'm 2 seasons in. It's a good show. It's a very slow burn, as you might expect from this kind of quiet, tense sort of premium TV thing. This sort of, will they be caught this week? Will something go slightly wrong? What tiny slip will they make that might lead to a small clue that the FBI can pick up on 6 episodes down the line? It's very slow, it's very cautious, but it does do a very, very good job of building that sort of fine tension.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about this show. It was one of those shows thinking that kind of first bit of the real explosion of like premium TV of the last 10 years. I think it sort of became popular around the time Breaking Bad kind of became mega popular. And it's been on the list to watch for a while, as it's one of those ones that consistently people rate.
It's always been on lists, yeah. I think when people were doing their best TV of the 2010s lists, it turned up quite reliably towards the top of those. So yeah, I've been meaning to watch it for a while, and now I am, and it's good.
It does sound like it's very tense, and I suppose it's like sort of a slow boil kind of build to the series climaxes where they must be quite good to pay off all that tension.
Well, yeah, I mean, I haven't gone and read much about the last season, because it has now finished, with season 6, because obviously, I don't particularly want to spoil myself, because with these sort of slow burn shows, it really is a bit of a bugger if you get told what's going to happen. But yeah, people seem fairly happy with the payoff, so I'm hoping when I eventually get there, it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, and I do really want to watch this because I'm a big fan of spy films. Spy films in all their incarnations, the kind of more over-the-top super spy films like James Bond, but also these ones that are more, I guess, espionage drama rather than action dramas. I mean, I assume it's one to enjoy if you're a fan of like John le Carré or recent John le Carré adaptations such as, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy or Little Drummer Girl.
Well, I haven't seen Little Drummer Girl, but yeah, it's very much about, the individual machinations of, as I say, the KGB and the FBI sort of squaring off against each other. They do this, they do that, they take that person, they take that person. It's, but this person seems to be working for them, but it's actually a double agent for them. It's all very, there's always another shoe waiting to drop. It's quite artfully done.
Like a game of chess.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun detail about the exact way the espionage works. Like the 2 main characters do quite a lot of going out and recruiting other people or going out and trying to get information out of people. And they have this array of disguises they wear, which are impressively convincing, actually. Sort of this huge amount of fake wigs and... I guess all wigs are fake. But yeah, wigs and fake moustaches and press-on scars and God knows what else.
No, interesting, yeah. I'm a big fan of Cold War set spy shows because, I think that was the sort of the height of the spycraft.
Well, yeah, obviously, one of the many upsides of being set in the past is, the spycraft is all very practical. They've got to actually take the things from one place to another. They've got to actually put the tapes in the machines. They haven't quite reached a point of, just zipping it across the interwebs.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that this show lives up to its reputation, because it is one of those sort of like hotly tipped shows.
Yeah, it's good. And yeah, as I say, if you're in the UK and you've got Disney Plus, as I say, to follow the Marvels, or indeed the Star Wars, then yeah, this is also available to you. It's on the Star channel. And yeah, if you like a good espionage drama, highly recommended. Good show. Anyway, so that's me, Alistair. What indoor agoraphobic activity have you been doing?
So I've been watching a new series on Netflix, which is a Korean crime drama called My Name. This is starring Han So-hee as the daughter of a policeman who's undercover in a gang, but also involved with the gang. He's a bit of a deadbeat dad. She's sort of a teenage tearaway, partly because she's got a deadbeat dad. And then he's unexpectedly murdered by someone who is quite likely to be a policeman. And then the plot is a sort of revenge show in which the main character, played by Han So-hee, first gets involved with the gang that her father was in to hunt for his killer, and then joins the police when she finds out it's probably a policeman who killed him. So there's this kind of layers of intrigue going on, in that she is in the police secretly informing for a gang, but also hunting for her father's murderer. And it's really good. It's really tense. It's got a lot of good crime bits going on. I can certainly recommend this show.
Having not seen it at all, or not knowing much about it, the first thing I thought when you described the plot was, that sounds a lot like Wrath of Man.
Yeah, it is another revenge story. Yeah, this week we're doing well for revenge shows. Yeah, I mean, it's...
Well, not just the revenge aspects, the embedding herself in the thing to find the person within that organisation thing.
Yeah, no, exactly, yeah. There's definitely thematic similarities of the person who is a secret badass. Although, much like Wrath of Man, she doesn't really disguise the fact that she's a secret badass. I think in like one of her first police assignments, she fights her way through about sort of 20 goons to arrest someone. The fight sequences are very good. There's a lot of spectacular sort of martial arts scenes, but also they're quite realistic. When someone gets battered with a metal stick or falls down a flight of stairs, you really feel it. So it's got that kind of sort of gritty street fighting edge to it.
That's good. Yeah, I feel like in your revenge stuff, you want to make sure the violence is good and cathartic when it comes.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And there's usually a couple of good fights in every episode. Yeah, and they keep the tension nice and high by proceeding quickly to tense scene. So, yeah, this is a show that was just the sort of Netflix algorithm served up to me, and I hadn't really heard much about it before, but I am really enjoying it.
Okay, cool. I'm glad you're ending the year as you spent most of it watching subtitled shows on Netflix.
Yeah, we've said a few times about how good it is that Netflix makes such a wide variety of like non-English language TV available. And, this really like fits in with many great crime shows. It's got the kind of the sense of like continuous tension. There's lots of twists and turns. I mean, it's not the sort of same atmosphere as, say, The Killing, which is much more dark, brooding, sort of like, Nordic noir thing going on. But it's got that sense of constant tension running through it, that same sense of, anyone could be a suspect. Who can you trust? Who can you not trust? There's sort of wheels within wheels. So there's a sort of international feel for the kind of crime genre, but this one has also got a very Korean focus to it. There's a lot of things that are clearly like culturally Korean brought in. It's got sort of martial arts, for example, that a lot of crime shows don't have. So yeah, we're kind of seeing that crime template that we're used to in the West, but applying to a different culture, which is interesting, as well as the fact it's just a good show.
Yeah, it's true, actually. I enjoyed The Killing back in the day. Don't think I've ever watched any other culture's crime shows.
I mean, the sort of the crime genres, I think, is a very British thing. We love our Christmas murder shows. I mean, like, is there any other, like, culture in the world where, like, one of the big Christmas highlights is there's going to be a show about someone being grisly murdered, and then people, like, asking questions about who it is? I mean, there's been Poirot, there's been Maigret, and now, more recently, there's, like, Luther.
I mean, I don't know about Christmas, but I think it is just one of the big TV genres. I mean, America churns out procedural crime and murder like it's going out of fashion. A lot of their biggest shows are often people with sexual tension investigate crimes.
Yeah, exactly. And also we've seen the crime genre ported into various formats, not just for different cultures, but also for like different subcultures or genres, like, Lucifer, magic and mythology and crime. I think it's one way of putting it.
Yeah, I mean, everyone loves crime. It's one of the jokes I've seen people make about comics is that it's a bit fucking weird. But in comics, if you try and make a crime story instead of a superhero story, everyone's like, oh, that's a bit risky, isn't it? That's a bit of a weird, fringe genre to work in. You sure you want to take that chance? It's like, yeah, crime, risky and fringe.
Yeah, it's like kind of the most popular thing in the planet, especially if you factor true crime in as well, which is true crime as well as totally dominating the podcast scene. For a long time, it's been kind of one of the most popular sort of book genres for a very long time. So
yeah, it's true. Maybe I shouldn't have been surprised that so many popular podcasts ended up being about crime, considering how many popular things in every other genre and medium have ended up being about crime.
Yeah, and I read an article recently which said that, like, there's really no surprise that true crime has come to dominate podcasting because it's dominated publishing for so long. Maybe publishing's even more siloed and people didn't notice.
Probably.
But yeah, if you're looking for something to watch on Netflix over Christmas and you've already binged all of The Witcher, or you're looking for something that's a bit different to normal, I can recommend My Name. It's a good crime show. You will certainly be entertained.
You've actually seen The Witcher?
I have. Not the new one.
Okay.
It came out yesterday and I have not watched it all in 24 hours. I did watch the first series when it came out a few years ago. It's very entertaining trash.
Fair enough. I keep considering it.
I'd recommend it. It's a good thing to watch over Christmas when, if you're tired at the end of the year and don't want something that's particularly taxing.
Okay, it'd be nice to see Henry Cavill getting to have some fun.
Well, it's a sort of broody, I'm a dark, haunted hero sort of way fun.
I take it back. That sounds exactly like him playing Superman. Okay, first up, Doctor Who Flux, aka the 13th series of the current Doctor Who reboot thing. This is, of course, the third and final full series featuring Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor and with Chris Chibnall as showrunner, and it takes in a single complete 6-part arc in which the Doctor is on the run from the Flux, a mysterious force that is destroying the entire universe and may or may not, brackets, pretty much definitely obviously is, connected to her own mysterious past with Division. And yep, so she's legging it from that, trying to work out what it is and how to stop it. Alongside her, of course, are Yaz, her one remaining companion from the previous series, played by Mandeep Gill, plus new character Dan, played by John Bishop. We have seen all 6 episodes of this. Alistair, what did you think of it?
So the plot for this series is incredibly epic and very convoluted, even by Doctor Who standards. This might be the most convoluted thing Doctor Who has ever done, which is really saying something. And it is, a really big undertaking. I'm not sure I really followed all the twists and turns of the plot and all the different threads involving the different villains and how they were weaved in the different periods of time. I'm not really convinced that it worked as a whole, in that it was, like I say, probably too convoluted and kind of too all over the place and kind of piled new stuff on top of new stuff. I did admire the epicness of it and that they did something really ambitious, this big 6-part story, lots of interweaving plots, characters, time periods, the Doctor's past, classic villains, new-ish villains that they brought back. I mean, the amount they threw at it, it wasn't dull, and they were really trying to do something that seemed really, really grandiose. And considering Doctor Who's done a lot of grandiose stories, you have to really aim high for something that's not just like another series. And we've been saying that the Chibnall ones there, a lot of them are just kind of a bit, Jodie Whittaker's great as the Doctor, but the Chibnall writing has just been kind of average to poor. I'm glad they pulled out the stops and threw everything at the wall, including the kitchen sink, for this. But I don't think it really came together into a convincing, cohesive story. So flawed, but admire the ambition of it.
I'm going to put some positives up front because I'm aware I personally have criticised the current era of Doctor Who a fair bit in the past for being, as Alistair said, mostly medium to poor. But fair enough, this is probably the best Chibnall-Whittaker series for me, just because it finally captured a sort of light sense of romp that I actually want from this show. They finally sort of fought back against the urge to bog us down with exposition for at least some of the time, a fair bit of the time, and actually had some fun. Like, even though there is a lot of plot here, at the same time, it is only one plot spread across 6 episodes, so the exposition is a bit dispersed, and they did, sensibly, I think, isolate a fair few of the individual episodes to do, like, specific stories still. Like, 2 or 3 episodes of this story, which, even though they are part of the wider Flux arc, they are also basically individual episodes in their own right, that only really tie into the Flux a bit at the beginning and end. Like, the Weeping Angels episode, which I think is the 4th one, I want to say. I thought that was good. I thought that was possibly the best Weeping Angels episode since Blink. That might not be a huge, massive competition, but still, I thought it was a decent use of them. It actually made them successfully creepy and made a good argument for continuing to use them, rather than just what everyone always says, which is no one should ever have used them again after Blink, including Stephen Moffat. And, there was an early in the series Sontarans episode, which was also a good time. I didn't think the finale quite works, mostly because of what Alistair said. I didn't think the plot really fully came together when the focus was on it. But I still had a decent amount of fun with it. It was still a decent sort of Doctor Who-y runaround. She, did some funny things. She did some genuinely big, epic upscale things. She didn't have to stop and spend too much time expositing. And yeah, as Alistair said as well, I liked the scale of it, the level of epic. I liked that it felt like he was trying something which wasn't boring. So yeah, I didn't hate watching it. I can criticise, and I will, but I don't feel like a sad addict fan chump for having watched it, and that sadly is almost progress for me in this era of Who.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you that this is the best Whittaker-Chibnall series they've done so far. It was more interesting than the previous ones. The bits that kind of were a bit more self-isolated, kind of stood on their own, kind of worked as good adventures. Like, yes, you have the ones you mentioned, the Weeping Angels one, and the Crimean War Sontaran one was good as well. Yeah, I always enjoy the ones when they bring in people from history. And this one is Mary Seacole, I never get the pronunciation right, who was a nurse at the same time as Florence Nightingale, but is not remembered as much as Florence Nightingale because she was black. So yeah, things like that, that's the kind of classic thing you want from Doctor Who, a bit of history weaved in with a bit of time travel drama. So that sort of stuff worked really well.
Yeah, no, I like that episode too. There was a weird sort of bit at the end where they defeated the Sontarans, was they all take themselves offline for the same 7 minutes. It's like, wow, that's a strategic error from the masters of military strategy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even I, a novice military commander, would probably have my troops take it in shifts to have their 7 minutes offline. Just a thought. That aside, good episode.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing which is that, like, there are lots of plot holes in it and flaws in this, and it's, there are things that didn't really make sense, and that's sort of one of them. But I suppose if you're looking for sense and consistency in Doctor Who, maybe it's best to look elsewhere. But that was maybe that did stretch the bounds of believability.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I said at the start. I want a certain sense of fun and romp with these things, and if they give it to me, I'm willing to overlook a fairly large level of plot holes. The times when I start getting pissy with Doctor Who is normally when it's not being very much fun, and therefore I have more time to poke at the things that are just stupid.
Yeah.
The only episode in this which I thought really fell properly flat, and which I wasn't having anywhere near enough fun to distract me from how bored I was the third one, I think, which delivered a lot of droning exposition through this gimmick where the Doctor was lost in time and floating in a CGI void whilst everyone else went through moments from their past. It's the sort of thing which I think is meant to expose plot and build character, but it was just quite boring. And it didn't really seem to add much, and I'd rather... I'm sure maybe there's a budget element, I don't know, but I'd rather have just had another fun episode, to be honest. I didn't really feel like the Flux plot needed all that backstory added, because the Flux plot is not that interesting. That was the episode that, for me, did not work.
No, that was definitely one that was just basically the bit when they wanted to drop all the exposition about what's going on, which I suppose it's good that they did that early on. But I think because at that point they started to really weave in some of the complexity of it. And that is when it started to fall apart for me a bit. The sense of this plot with the Flux and division and all these kind of the Doctor's backstory. I just felt you could kind of see it groaning under the fact there's too much really going on here for this to work.
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the division retcon, but at least I can sort of understand it, even if I don't think giving the Doctor a secret past as a secret agent really adds anything. But yeah, the stuff with the villains, what they called, Swarm and Azure, and time, the concepts of time and space, which are concepts and also planets and also sort of abstract forces and also somehow their master. That didn't really come together or feel very cohesive. The part I found particularly strange was in the last episode, which was when you think they really would get on that. They were swept aside for most of it, and then they just came back at the end to get very quickly killed.
Yeah.
It feels like even you lost interest in this writer, Chris Chibnall, I suppose. I mean, the fact that it didn't take up much of the finale meant I was also able to ignore it, which makes criticising it a lot easier. Because I find, if you don't care, I'd have to see why I should. I quite enjoyed the Grand Serpent, actually. He wasn't a complicated villain, but it was a very satisfying sort of villainous theatrical performance.
Yeah, no, he was a sort of classic, TV baddie that he's just really bad. Probably a villain that they will try and bring back at some point. Conspicuously kept him alive at the end. Yeah, I mean, he was all right and things like that. I thought it was strange in the last episode they kind of brought the Sontarans back and made the ending basically about fighting Sontarans again and put the kind of Swarm and Azure thing to the side.
Well, yeah, it felt like, if anything, maybe episode 5 should have been about Sontarans and the Grand Serpent, and episode 6 should have been about Swarm and Azure. But again, it seems like even he lost interest in Swarm and Azure a bit, or realised they would crumble a bit under too much focus.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing is there was just too much plot, really. There was division, there was Swarm and Azure, there was Sontarans, and even, things like the Weeping Angels were folded in quite neatly. There wasn't really enough space to have division being the big villain behind everything and Swarm and Azure also being the big villains behind everything in a slightly different way, and also the Grand Serpent being another villain who was sort of behind everything, and the Sontarans being a main villain, and all of this had to be paid off. I mean, in the final episode, they had to come up with this conceit of the Doctor being split in three and kind of teleporting around or being divided just so that they could have the Doctor in enough places to pay off all the plot. Because it would just be too confusing without the Doctor involved in a plot line that's going on here, there, and everywhere. Oh, and also there was the plot line with Grey Worm from Game of Thrones and his girlfriend flying around through space as well. I mean, that kind of got weaved in as well. And the dog person. It really is just too much. I mean, I think maybe if they'd had 4 out of these 7 plots, it would have maybe worked a bit better.
It did feel like maybe they could have used another couple of episodes, and who knows, there may be a COVID issue there, but there was a lot going on. But then again, as I say, as someone who has found previous Chibnall series a bit unambitious and boring, I'll take this over it, to be honest. At least there's something to talk about.
Yeah, no, there's lots to analyse here.
What's his name? Calvinista, the dog guy. Again, not the most complex character in the world, but I quite enjoyed him. It's a good sort of Doctor Who character, but he's got a basic concept. It's quite a thin sketch, but it works, and he's fun to have around.
I did like the twist at the end of the first episode with the species bonding, that you think that they're invading Earth, but actually they're coming to save Earth.
Exactly. A clever twist on him being a dog, I suppose. So yeah. Good job, Chibnall. I enjoyed that. That was a fun concept.
Yeah, there's lots of good stuff going on. Like, say, the Grand Serpent was pretty good. I mean, I just sort of made fun of it, but I did like the plot line of Grey Worm. I can't remember. There was too many characters' names to remember. But
Grey Worm was Vinda and his girlfriend was Belle.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, I did like their plot line. And again, they weaved it in with the fighting the Sontarans at the end to sort of kind of make them additional companions. That did actually work, even though I was just making fun of it for being a bit too much. Sadly, what I think didn't really work, which was kind of important to the end, is that Division are not particularly interesting or good villains. I think digging into the Doctor's past isn't that interesting because it's better when the Doctor's sort of unknowable and sort of unknown, and I think the series over the decades has worked hard to try and keep the element of the Doctor being a mysterious figure, and I don't think answering that is particularly fruitful terrain. And also, the thing about Division and the Doctor coming from another dimension and all this is that I find it difficult to get emotionally invested in it because I'm completely convinced it's going to be unwound, either by Chibnall or a future writer. It's too much penetrating the mysteriousness of the Doctor to the point when it actually deflates the character a bit. So I'm completely convinced it's going to be undone. So I can't really get emotionally invested in it.
It's a lot to sort of load onto the Doctor, and I don't really fully get what they're gaining from it. And this is probably close to repeating what I said at the end of my Series 12 review, so, if there's some brilliant story that comes out of it, then fair enough. And as I say, I didn't hate this, but I'm not sure it needed the Division stuff to work. And the part about the Doctor being from another dimension, which is baffling to me. I mean, maybe this is something they're going to pay off in Jodie Whittaker's final 3 specials that they've still got. But, as you say, it never feels like revealing more biographical details about the Doctor's past is particularly useful. I mean, Stephen Moffat spent a year threatening to reveal the Doctor's name and then, not incorrectly, finished it off by not doing it because there's no point, Whatever you reveal, it's just going to be something everyone else has to ignore or write around or write out.
I think also Moffat realised that there's absolutely nothing that he could make the Doctor's name that wasn't either A, deeply disappointing, or B, a complete cop-out.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's more interesting if it's mysterious. Once you actually attach something to it, you can't avoid the sense of, oh, is that it?
Yeah.
I mean, then again, if Moffat was smart enough to realise that, why wasn't he smart enough to realise that doing a year-long storyline and building up to not revealing it is silly? But anyway, not reviewing Moffat. But yes, point is, what Chibnall's done is make the mistake that Moffat managed to avoid making.
Exactly, yeah. The thing is, it's going to end the exact same way, which is that there's no big revelation behind Division that couldn't be either deeply underwhelming or be a total cop-out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm always prepared to eat my words on this stuff when we're mid-storyline, but yeah, so far, it's hard to imagine the version that works. But despite the presence of Division, I was able to mostly think through the parts when they were involved and still had a decent time with this. I thought this was a fun romp. It sort of kept moving fast enough and there were enough plates in the air, but the presence of a few plates that I didn't really care about or that mildly annoyed me didn't really bother me that much.
Yeah.
Although, as people have pointed out many times online since this aired, the Doctor does endorse quite a lot of genocide in that final episode. Like, a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is, but I don't really feel the need to litigate it, but didn't feel particularly in character.
No, exactly. And considering in the David Tennant Sontarans, the first one they brought back the Sontarans, there's the whole bit at the end when the Doctor's going to sacrifice himself because he has to give the Sontarans an opportunity to surrender. And it's only because a character introduced for that one episode sacrifices themselves that the Doctor gets out of it. And I felt that, like, even the point is the Doctor gives even the Sontarans who are incapable of surrender a chance to surrender. And then this time, it's like, no, just wipe them all out.
But I guess once you introduce something like the Flux, which is removing whole universes in the blink of an eye, things like, the Sontarans have also died become a bit less of a thing, but still, to having the Doctor directly press the button on the old genocide still feels a bit harsh.
Yeah, a bit out of character.
So yeah, it didn't completely ruin the whole experience for me, but definitely jarred me out of it enough to go, what? She did that? Did she? Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, well done to Chibnall and Whittaker for going out on a relative high. Hopefully the final few specials will build on what's been achieved here.
Yeah. And I did like John Bishop, actually, as an addition to the cast. Again, when they announced him, I was a bit concerned, a bit like, I don't know, is this guy going to be, a comedian? Is he going to be good? But then, every time I'm concerned about a core cast member, the show does always, handle them well. Like, I was concerned when way back at the beginning when they announced Billie Piper would be the companion, and Rose was obviously great. I was concerned when they brought Catherine Tate in, and again, she was great. So, yeah, and I like John Bishop. I like bringing his sort of Scouserness and the sort of rivalry between Liverpool and Sheffield, making that a kind of a character bit between him and Yaz. So it was nice. So yeah, a good bit of new companion is always a good thing in Doctor Who, especially when it works well.
Yeah, no, he was a fun character. He did kind of feel like the one character they could have done without in this incredibly overfull series. He added entertainment value, but not much to the actual plot. But, I'll take my entertainment value where I can get it, so fair enough.
Yeah, and a bit more Yaz. I think she got a bit more space to breathe now that the companions she began with have gone. And this has generated a lot of speculation online that they seem to be manoeuvring a sort of Yaz into a sort of falling in love with the Doctor plot line. Or at least that's the hint they seem to be getting, which obviously they've done before with, obviously, notably Rose, but also other companions. And it would be interesting because it's the first, as far as I'm aware, the sort of same-sex companion Doctor romance plotline, I guess, if you don't count Captain Jack because he fancies everyone. But it's interesting that they're moving in that direction. Again, similar to what we were talking about with Arcane last week. Hopefully it's not just a bit of queer baiting where they'll completely not pay off or just kind of gloss over. But they definitely had a sort of deepening and enriching of the Yaz-Doctor relationship in this series.
Yeah, they are definitely hinting at that. I still kind of feel like Yaz doesn't have a huge amount of personality beyond that storyline, but it's a thing that I'll be interested to see if and how they actually pay it off on screen.
Well, yeah, I guess we'll find out more in the New Year's Day adventure. It's Eve of the Daleks.
It's true, we are less than 2 weeks away for the next chapter in this, so I'm not going to wait long to find out. Okay, and last up today, we will be talking about self-explanatory new movie Wrath of Man, directed by Guy Ritchie and starring Jason Statham. This is, as we sort of vaguely hinted at earlier, about a man known as H, who gets a job as a cash truck driver in Los Angeles, and who we later find out is actually a badass crime man who is undercover at this cash truck company to find one of the guards who was instrumental in a heist that caused the inadvertent death of his son. So, yep, it's a sort of heist revenge thriller, and we have seen it. It is on Amazon. Alistair, what did you think of it?
So this film is fairly generic in that it hits most of the, well, I'll say archetypes if I'm being polite, or cliches if I'm being impolite, of the sort of friendly neighborhood sociopath subgenre. The film of there's this guy and he appears to be a normal guy, but actually he's a super badass who kind of blows loads of people away with a lot of guns. It kind of hits every note from this subgenre. Me and my partner watched it together. We're both sort of fans of this genre, and we were like, we know exactly what's going to happen at this point and what's going to happen at that point. But despite the fact that it does, I don't know, stick quite closely to the archetype, it is very tense, and there's some good action scenes, and I was kind of gripped, and I was waiting to see what happened next. And it was a really good thrill ride. So not doing anything original, but it is well executed.
Yeah, I do think this is a very po-faced example of the sort of crime revenge movie. It's very well executed, as you say. It's very well directed. It looks very attractive. When the action scenes happen, especially, they're very well choreographed and very well set out, so you can always tell where everyone is and how much danger they're in and exactly who just blew them away. So yeah, it does do that stuff well, and I don't quite know whether the fact that I didn't like it that much, as maybe coming across, is the result of me just not being that into this subgenre, or whether there's anything, air quotes, wrong with it. I think the main problem I came away with, to be honest, is considering it's 2 hours long, and the first two-thirds of it, two-thirds, three-quarters, don't contain that much action. There's quite a lot of time left to be filled by the characters and their personalities, so it's kind of unfortunate that most of them do not have one. Jason Statham at least gets a full arc of some kind, although he's downplaying every emotion he has so hard that it doesn't exactly fill the screen, and everyone else is just kind of some dude. And yeah, the action is good when it arrives, as I say, well filmed, well choreographed, exciting, but I found the opening chunk of film to get to the action a bit of a slog. There's a sort of Rashomon-y multiple perspective structure which does at least spread out the plot and bring in some revelations a bit, but none of them are mind-blowing, and as I say, none of the characters seem that well developed, so it didn't really grip me as much as it could or should. Why isn't there more action or more characterization or just more something?
Yeah, I mean, this is very light on characterization. Like, Jason Statham is a tough man who blows people away with guns, and like, yeah, there's even less characterization for everyone else. I mean, there's some soldiers who are bored because they don't get to be soldiers anymore.
Maybe someone thought he was doing an intense storyline about PTSD there, but it didn't really dig into it much.
No, I mean, there's very little character development for any of the characters, really. And there's quite a long bit at the beginning introducing everyone and introducing the place where they store all the money and the money trucks come in and out from. There's kind of a big bit setting all that up, with introducing a lot of the kind of supporting cast, and with a lot of manly and very sexist dialogue. Just a lot of tough men being proper men in the fact that they constantly insulting each other, calling each other gay, basically much like 15-year-olds did in the early aughts. Then doing manly things, like there's just a bit when Jason Statham has to lift some weights, apparently, and that's just kind of thrown in there. There's just a lot of men being men that is supposed to, I think, I don't know, either build up the sense of this is a sort of a very masculine world, but there's so little characterization. You've just basically got like, so these are a lot of men. I get it that these are men and they are tough men, but beyond that, they're just tough men.
Yeah, it was very much a parade of vague backslapping stereotypes and nicknames. Sort of, oh yeah, you can call me Bullet, and this is Boy Sweat Dave, and this is Dickface Phil. I believe or not, only one of those nicknames I just made up.
I wonder which one.
If you fucking love Guy Ritchie movies and tough, manly movies where men have to sweat on each other to prove they're real men, then you may enjoy this more. That bit is downplayed a bit after the opening section. As I say, it's in these sort of 4 bits devoted to the 4 plot sections, and thankfully only the first bit goes in quite that hard on the testosterone. But yeah, none of the other bits are that thrilling either. If anything, the worst part is the subsequent bits aren't even funny. At least the bit at the front was kind of funny in a way that leaves you thinking, intentional? Yes or no?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I was like, this is kind of funny, but is it intentionally funny? Or is it actually supposed to be like, yeah, I'm really impressed by these men and how manly they are? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking, like, is this film trying really hard to say something about the role of men in society? Or is it trying so desperately not to engage with current debates around gender that is actually inadvertently created something that's quite a strong statement about the role of men in society and gender? Because you've got Jason Statham, a man who has no ability to express his emotions in any way, shape or form. He can't be intimate with anyone at all. There's only one brief scene of intimacy is so that he can then interrogate a character that he seduces. He's repressed his feelings about his dead son so much that he has to go on a massive killing spree in order to express his grief for his son. You know, is this saying something about toxic masculinity, or is it trying so hard to not say that? Anything about toxic masculinity? There's a group of soldiers who aren't soldiers anymore, and they're bored and they're restless, you know, so they start committing very violent crimes. Is this trying to say something about how, what's the role of men in society, and that men without clear roles or a role in society can be dangerous and violent, and maybe it would be better if we could think of some role for manliness in society rather than just leaving all this repressed sort of violence and testosterone boiling below the surface? I mean, there might even be something quite profound about how sexist and violent these men are to each other, or it's really just inadvertently stumbled across this in just trying to show men being men.
Well, yeah, I mean, what you've just said is actually quite an interesting take on the film, and I am absolutely unable to tell you with any confidence whether the filmmakers intended it or not. I honestly don't know. If they intended it, they've really left it down to interpretation. It's not textual in any meaningful way.
It is very much Schrodinger's metaphor. It is simultaneously profound and stupid at the same time.
I mean, there's something Yeah, I mean, in the bits with the soldiers, there's a certain amount of, these guys just wanting to do something and wanting purpose, but I feel like maybe if they just had one conversation during that section about that, or about their role, or the role of men, or something. I mean, I'm not arguing for having things brutally spoon-fed to me, but yeah, they just left everything so superficial that it was really... I feel like we're really having to reach to attach any meaning to it whatsoever. It doesn't help that Jason Statham, I mean, bless him, and I've got a lot of affection for him based on the more fun films he's been in, but he's just a void in the middle of this film. I'm assuming this is direction. It's not just that Jason Statham turned up barely caring. I'm assuming he's been told to act this way. But he's just such a complete shut-down non-character that it's quite hard to really fully invest in his arc.
I mean, they do hang a lantern on it at one point, to borrow a writing phrase, that there is, his ex-wife tells him basically you're incapable of expressing any emotion. So I assume the fact they included that is to basically say, like, this is his character. His character is that he is closed off, introverted, kind of emotionally repressed. And that's why he deals with the death of his son by resorting to extreme violence. But that's the most complex bit of intentional characterization in the whole film.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you wanted to see this theme explored in more detail, then Jesus Christ, the Punisher Netflix show did a better job.
Yeah, no, it's very much the Punisher, the kind of Guy Ritchie Punisher, isn't it? It's the same revenge thing. It's about, a violent man who channels his, the loss of his family into more violence. But yeah, I mean, again, they're saying it's like, that's the friendly neighborhood sociopath character. It's not doing anything original with any of these characters or tropes.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. Like, if they're not going to try and say anything profound, and although we may have tried to read it into it, I don't think they're really trying. Then they could have, put in a few more action scenes and made it a bit more entertaining. I feel. I sort of came into this expecting a sort of violent revenge film, and I would have been happy to find that it was a profound take on male violence instead, but what actually happened is it turned out to be neither.
No, exactly, yeah. In anything it does have to say, that might just be purely by accident.
Anyway, so I don't mean to steamroll you. It sounded like before I started up you liked it a bit more than I did.
I mean, it's entertaining. I found it is an entertaining Friday night film. The action scenes are quite tense, especially the big climactic action scene that's kind of very much sort of the second half of the film. And, there's lots of references or sort of things borrowed from the classics of the heist genre. And there's a lot of references to Heat introduced throughout. There's sort of the armoured masked people with their automatic rifles sort of committing high stakes robbery of money vans is, pretty much straight out of Heat. There's a similar bit similar to Heat, when the villains, the robbers, as soon as they inadvertently have to kill someone, they then basically switch to okay, we're doing full murder on everyone now. Which again, in Heat, it's kind of done to show that how professional they are, whereas in this, it's just more just how cold people are. And there's a lot of sort of allusions like the bank heist scene in Heat and things like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, kind of similar to, I think we were saying this about, what was it, Blood Red Sky? That Netflix vampire film. There's one member of the sort of baddie squadron who is picked out quite early as being the slightly unstable, unreliable, probably going to flip out and start murdering people one. And sure enough, he does. And sure enough, he is the one who turns out to be the final showdown baddie.
And then, but also similar to Blood Red Sky, when that was a good creepy villain, however, quite obviously queer-coded. Again, they've hit another troubling stereotype here, which is, the really nasty, vicious villain has facial scarring, which is something that seems to become a sort of a lazy trope recently amongst Hollywood, is that basically, like, really nasty villains are people with scars on their faces. We saw it in Solo. The Paul Bettany character was another example of this. It's just become a bit of a cliche at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it was only I think it was only a tiny scar, so we would definitely recognise him against all the other random dudes, but yeah.
Yeah, considering there are several dark-haired men with beards in this film.
Yeah. It didn't come up in his dialogue, did it? I know he didn't do a huge speech about how twisted he'd been by his disfigurement or some shit.
No, but it is a sort of, a sort of a lazy stereotype that Hollywood likes to indulge in, that, like, people who are rotten on the inside look rotten on the outside.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, it's just a sort of another way that the kind of, this film is inadvertently saying something about society without really intending to.
Truly, it's one of the great unintentional philosophical works of our time.
Yeah. It's like, following up from Friends or something like that. The last thing that really tried not to say something but ended up saying quite a lot.
Well, the 90s have Friends, the 2020s have Laugh of Man.
Yeah. This is how we've come on as a society.
That's not really going to do much to change the feeling that the 90s were better, is it?
No, no. But yeah, as a fan of the heist movie, it's got the kind of, again, archetypal stroke cliched bits of a heist movie. Like there's a bit when they, explain exactly how the heist is going to go down. I mean, that just sort of reminded me how Army of Thieves managed to do that, but inject some kind of humor and levity into it and kind of play around with the trope. This is, again, very much the straight up doing the tropes. Whereas, recently we covered Army of Thieves that found a way to make them sort of a bit more interesting, or maybe even deconstruct them a bit in a sort of slightly postmodern way.
Well, yeah, I mean, Army of Thieves, I guess, was trying to be a bit more of a comedy, or an action comedy, or whatever. Whereas this, I don't think has much eye on the joke. But obviously, yes, I would rather watch Army of Thieves again than watch this.
And both used Ride of the Valkyries in key scenes. It's another similarity.
Okay, fair enough. I'm convinced. Truly, this is the Uber work.
It's all the cliches, or a very archetypal version of the kind of the heist movie, depending on how polite you want to be about it. But yeah, anything interesting to say about this film is probably not intended. Just as if you try really, really hard to stay out of an argument, your silence is in some way a comment on what's going on. And I feel this film is saying a lot with its silence, its manly silence.
I feel that watching this did not make me feel better about not getting to see Spider-Man.
Yeah, I think Spider-Man would have probably been more fun.
No shit.
That's all we have time for in this pre-Christmas episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence. We haven't discussed it much today, but we are very close to Christmas and thus the end of the year. But if you've enjoyed this episode, then please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode. And if you want to give us a Christmas present, then please leave us a review, as it helps others find out about the show. After that, if you're still feeling generous, then you can visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can find all the other episodes of the podcast, bonus audio content, and short written pieces by Nick and myself. If you head there between now and the end of the year, you'll find our annual rundowns of the year's film and TV.
And if you want still more updates on our festive New Year comings and goings, you can go to MFV Podcast on Twitter or Moderate Fantasy Violence on Facebook, where if we're feeling particularly generous, we might bestow some of our thoughts on whatever's happening culturally over Christmas. We might even get to see the Spider-Man film, who knows. And if you want to have more on our personal Christmases, including what we had for dinner and such, then I'm NickMB on Twitter, or Nick Bryan Writes on Facebook, or nickbryan.com on the general internet.
And you can find more from me on Twitter, where I'm at Alistair J.R. Ball, or get more of my writing at redtrainblog.com. In the next issue of Moderate Fantasy Violence, we will be doing our annual Year in Review episode, where Nick and I will count down the best film and TV of 2021, and we'll be reviewing the complete first series of Hawkeye. Join us for that in 2 weeks. Until then, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Goodbye.
Sorry, Spidey.
Sorry fucking me.